Hello beautiful people, welcome to Remy's Fashion. My name is Remy. On this channel, we upload pattern drafting and sewing tutorials. This is a requested video on how to draft a basic trouser pattern. There are different ways to draft a trouser pattern. I will show you one of the easiest methods in this tutorial. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and please share this video to others that will need it. Do you want to learn how to draft a trouser pattern perfectly? Then keep watching. You will need the following measurements. You will need horizontal and vertical measurements. If you want to learn how to take trouser measurements, I have a video tutorial on this channel on how to take accurate trouser measurements. I'll put the link in the description box below and on the cards above. The vertical measurements you need are the out seam, the inseam, waist to hip, waist to thigh, waist to knee, waist to ankle. And the horizontal measurements, these are also known as the circumference measurements, and they are the waist circumference, the hip circumference, thigh circumference, knee circumference, and ankle circumference. The measurements I'll be working with are... The first thing I'm going to do is to draw out a starting point. I always like to have a starting point before starting any project. This starting point, I'm going to label it my waistline. So this is going to be the waistline where I'm going to be taking all my measurements from. So after drawing out my starting point, I will label it waistline. So I'm just going to put WL for waistline. So the next thing I'm going to do is to measure out the length of my trousers. This is also known as the out seam. That measurement for me is 42.5 inches. So I'm going to measure out 42.5 inches from my waistline. And 42.5 inches will put me here, and I will mark. After measuring out the length of my trousers, I will now draw a straight line. So this line is the length of my trousers. So you can put trouser length. I'll draw a horizontal line outwards, like this, and this is going to be our ankle line. I'm going to label it ankle line, so just put AL there, so we know that that's our ankle line. So we're going to be taking all our vertical measurements from the waist down. So the first measurement I'm going to be taking is from the waist to the hip, and my measurement is 8 inches. So I will measure 8 inches down like this, and I'll put a dot there, and then I'm going to draw a horizontal line across. And this is going to be my hip line. I'm just going to put hip line, HL. I'm just going to be using initials. So I'm going to be measuring out my crotch line. My crotch line is 11.5 inches. How I got 11.5 inches is the formula to get the crotch depth is out seam minus inseam. My out seam is 42.5 inches and my inseam is 31 inches. And when you subtract 31 inches from 42.5 inches, you get 11.5 inches. So that is my crotch depth, 11.5 inches. If you want to know how to take measurements for your out seam and your inseam, I'll put the link of the video in the description box below. So mine is 11.5 inches. So I'm going to measure out 11.5 inches from my waist. So 11.5 inches from my waistline is going to put me here, 11.5. And I will draw a horizontal line across to connect my points. This is my crotch line. I'll just put CL. I will then measure my thigh. The thigh is usually 3 inches below the crotch line. So this is my crotch line. So I'll measure 3 inches below. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal line across to connect my points. And then this is my thigh line. So I'm just going to put TL. The next vertical measurement is the knee. I will measure my knee measurement from the waist. From my measurement, my knee measurement is 22 inches. So I'm going to measure from the waist, 22 inches down, and I will mark. And I will connect with a horizontal line, and I will label it my knee line. I'll put the initials there so we know. We already have our ankle line. Now that we have all our vertical measurements in place, we will now use the hip measurement, which is the widest measurement when drafting trousers, to form a rectangle to make our trouser block. My hip measurement after calculation is 11.75 inches. How I got my hip measurement is my hip circumference is 46 inches. I added 1 inch ease. That will give me 47 inches. And when I divide 47 inches by 4, I have 11.75 inches. So 11.75 inches is the widest measurement for my trousers. I will now use that measurement to form a rectangle, and that is going to give us our trouser block. I'll plot that measurement to my waistline, my hip line, my crotch line, my thigh line, knee line, and ankle line. I will use it to form a rectangle. That rectangle is going to be our trouser block. So I'm going to measure 11.75 inches on my waistline. 11.75 inches is going to put me here, and I will mark. I'm just going to put a dot there, and then I'll measure the same 11.75 inches on my hip line, and that puts me here. So I'm just going to do the same thing on the crotch line, on the thigh line, the knee line, and the ankle line. I'm going to connect all the points to form my rectangle, and this is going to be our trouser block. So this is the trouser block. This rectangle is our trouser block. So it is from this block that we will draft our front trouser pattern. The next thing we'll need to do is to plot in our horizontal measurements. These are also known as our circumference measurements. So we're going to be using this block to draft our front trouser pattern. And then this is going to be our center front. I'm going to label here center front, CF. I'm going to be taking my measurement from the center front to the side. I'm going to be starting from the waistline. Find out what your waist circumference measurement is. You divide that by 4, and that is what I'm going to be plotting on the waistline. My waist circumference is 40 inches, and if I divide that by 4, it's going to give me 10 inches. I'm going to add 1 inch dart allowance. I'm not going to be adding ease to my waistline. You can decide to add ease to yours. For this particular tutorial, I'm not going to be adding any ease to the waistline because I took my waist measurement how I want it. So my waist is 40 divided by 4 is going to give me 10 inches, and I'm adding 1 inch dart allowance, and that's going to be 11 inches. And I'm going to take my measurement from the center front towards the side front. So I'm going to take my measurement from this line inwards like this, and that's 11 inches. I'm going to mark. I'll just put a mark there, and that includes my 1 inch dart allowance. And then I will use my curve to connect from this point, this 11 inches point. I'm going to connect it to my hip line. So you see, I'm going to connect from here all the way down to the hip line. And this is my hip curve. The next one is my hip line. Remember when we formed the trouser block, we used the hip measurement. So I will just confirm that measurement, which is 11.75 inches. And mine is correct. This is 11.75. Take the measurement for your hip line and divide it by 4. Whatever you get is what you're going to plot in your crotch extension to create the crotch curve. This hip line measurement, my hip line measurement is 11.75 inches. We're going to create our crotch extension. So to be able to do that, you take the measurement of your hip line and you divide it by 4. Whatever you get is what you're going to plot in for your crotch extension to create the crotch curve. And that's going to be on my crotch line. And then this point here is from this point I'm going to measure outwards to create my crotch curve. So you measure it outwards, just like I did here. So I drew out a horizontal line outwards. The next thing is to draw out our crotch curve. Measure 1 inch at a 45-degree angle from this point. I'm going to measure 1 inch at a 45-degree angle from this point. Just put a dot there. And then I'm going to use my curve ruler, and I'll connect these 3 points. This point to this point to this point. So now I've connected these point to this point to this point, and then this is our waistline. So it's been connected. So this is our crotch curve. The next thing I'm going to do now is to divide this block into two. Remember, we use the widest part of our measurement, which is the hip line, to form this block. I used 11.75 inches to form this block. So I'm going to now divide 11.75 by 2, and that is going to give me 5.87 inches. So whatever you have, you divide it into 2, and then you use it to divide the block into 2. So now I'm going to measure and then divide my block into 2. So the easiest way to divide it is to use your tape, measure 11.75 or whatever your measurement is into 2 like this, and then I'm just going to put my tape rule on that line, and then I'll mark the center point. This is my center point. So I'm just going to do that all the way down. I will now use a vertical line to connect all the points, and that is going to divide my block into 2. This line is our grain line for our trouser pattern. So I'm just going to write grain line. The next thing I'm going to do is to create our dart. We will create our dart from this line. Remember, we left a 1 inch for our dart. I want the length of my dart to be 4 inches, and I will take half an inch on each side of the dart line. So 4 inches is what I want the length of my dart to be. I'm going to mark, this is 4 inches, and then I'm going to take half an inch on each side of this line. Half an inch on each side. So the next thing I'm going to do is to draw out the dart legs. I'm going to connect that half an inch to my 4 inches like this. Form the dart legs. This is my dart for my front pattern. The next one is my tie line. My measurement after calculation is 14 inches. I'm just going to measure 14 inches straight, and I'll just put a dot there. So for my knee is 10 inches, and by the time I divide that by 2, it's going to give me 5 inches. So I'm going to take 5 inches on each side of the grain line, and I will mark. I will do the same thing for my ankle. My ankle measurement is 8 inches, and by the time I divide that by 2, it's going to give me 4 inches. So I'm going to plot 4 inches on both sides of the grain line. And I will mark. So the next thing I'm going to do is I will connect from my crotch line to my knee line, and then from my knee line to my ankle line. So this is my leg curve. You can use this, or you can use any curve you have, but I'm going to be using this leg curve. And then I'm going to connect directly from the crotch line to the knee line. And then from the knee line, I'll connect to the ankle. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to connect the side from the crotch to the knee. I'm going to be using my ruler like this, and then I'll connect from the knee to the ankle like this. We have formed our front trouser pattern. So this is our front trouser pattern. So I'm going to trace out this pattern onto another pattern paper, which I'm going to use to draft our back pattern. I will now trace out this pattern before adding seam allowances. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to add seam allowances round my pattern. I'm going to add half an inch seam allowance to the waist, to the side, and to the center front. And then I'll add 2 inches to the hem. Seam allowances run my pattern. This is what it looks like. So the marker in red, it's my front trouser pattern. I will now go ahead and I'll cut out this pattern. my front trouser pattern. This is what it looks like. I'm going to cut 2 of this pattern, and that is what I'm going to use to form my front trouser pattern. So I'm just going to write front trouser pattern on here, and then I'll cut 2. And also add notches. Add notches to your hip line on both sides and to the knee line on both sides for ease of connecting the pattern pieces together. So the next thing we're going to do now is to draft the back pattern. We're going to be drafting the back trouser pattern from the front. So this is my front pattern traced out. I have traced it onto another pattern paper. I'm going to be using this to draft my back trouser pattern. The first thing I'm going to do is to increase the back pattern by 1 inch so that the back pattern will be at least 1 inch bigger than the front pattern. That is half an inch on the side and half an inch on the center back. So I'm going to label this side is my center back and this is my side. So measure half an inch on the side and then I'm going to draw it. Drawing out half an inch on the side. The next thing is to work on the waistline. I'm going to increase the waistline from the center back by 2 inches. You can do yours by 1.5 inches or 1 inch. It depends on your body structure. The reason why we're increasing it is because when you sit down, your trouser will not be dropping down. So this is my waistline. So from my waistline, I'm going to increase mine by 2 inches. So 2 inches puts me here. I'll mark. And then I'm going to connect from these 2 inches that I went up to the side back where I increased it by half an inch. This is our back waist shaping. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to plot in our circumference measurements. My waist circumference measurement is 11 inches, including my 1 inch dart allowance. I'll take my measurement from the side back like this. From the half an inch that I increased it, I'll measure 11 inches from there and then I will mark. 11 inches puts me here and I'll just put a dot there. The next one is my hip line. My hip circumference measurement is 11.75 inches. I'll measure from my new point and I will mark 11.75. Measure it from my new line. 11.75 puts me here and I will mark. So the next one we're going to be working on is the crotch line. So don't forget to transfer your star from the front. This is where the extension started from. So I have transferred it to this pattern as well. So I will drop the crotch line by half an inch. So half an inch. I will use a horizontal line to connect the points. So this is my new crotch line. And then I'll drop the star down here. So my crotch line extension for the back, I'm going to increase it by 2 inches. So I measure 2 inches outwards like this. So this is the crotch extension for the back because the back is always bigger than the front. I'll now measure 2 inches at a 45-degree angle from our new crotch line. This is our new crotch line and I'm taking it from that star. 2 inches, I'll put a dot there. The next thing we need to do is to connect the waistline to the hip line and to the crotch line. So this is our new waistline. I'm going to connect it to the hip line. What I like to do here is to just connect using a straight line like this, and then I will use my curve to connect from this point to this point to this point to form my crotch curve for the back, and from this point to this point I'll just connect it. So this is my crotch curve for the back. The next thing I'm going to do now is to add half an inch to the knee line and to the ankle line. So I'll measure half an inch. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to connect from the crotch line to the knee line and then from the knee line to the ankle line. The next thing now is to add the back dart. I will put the dart in the middle of the waist. My waist measurement is 11 inches. By the time I divide that by 2, it's going to give me 5.5 inches. So I'm going to measure and I will mark. So I'm just going to fold my tape. I'll measure 11 inches, okay? And then I'll start taking my measurement from the side back like this to center my dart. And that puts me here, 5.5 inches. And the length of my dart is going to be 4 inches. So I'm going to measure 4 inches down. Then I'll draw it out like this. And then I'll measure half an inch on each side of the line to enable me to draw out my dart legs. And then I'll connect. This is my dart for the back. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to add half an inch seam allowance on the center back, the side, and then the waist. And then we'll cut out the pattern. This is the pattern after adding all the seam allowances. I added half an inch to the waistline, the center back, and the side. Don't forget to add your notches to your hip line on both sides, to your knee line on both sides, and to the ankle line on both sides, for ease of connection when sewing both the front and the back together. The next thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to cut out this pattern and then I will show you what it looks like. Out the back pattern, this is what it looks like. So don't forget your notches. Don't forget to put a notch on the hip line on both sides, on the knee line on both sides, and even on the ankle line on both sides. So I'm going to be writing, this is my back trouser pattern, and I'm going to be cutting 2, okay? And then this is the back. So these are my front and back patterns. Hope this tutorial was helpful. Please give me a thumbs up. And if you have any comments or suggestions, I'll be in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. See you in my next tutorial. Take care and God bless.